Spiritual Psychics TV is hosting the first annual recognition of achievements, acknowledging those who dedicate their lives to a spiritual act of kindness. Spiritual Psychics TV, bringing spiritual people together.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Spiritual Psychic TV and this show broadcast live on Facebook and YouTube, Being Spiritual, with me, your host, Ashley Robinson. Happy New Year to you all. I mean, this is my first opportunity to have a show into the new year, as the last opportunity would have been New Year's Eve, and we had postponed that. So great to be back in the new year. I think we can still get away with saying Happy New Year probably for certainly another couple of days, maybe even another couple of weeks. But for me, it's all about 1 foot forward and taking 1 step at a time and taking the most of the experiences and the opportunities. So wonderful to have you all with us. If you are joining us for the first time, this is a spiritualist philosophy show. You can ask me anything. The subject tonight will be a little bit about life after life. What is life after life like? What is heaven like? What do people as spirit beings experience? A little bit of introduction into the concept of dimensions and many houses within the mansions. That is that place I call heaven, or the spirit world. And if you are a first-time visitor, as I said, a very special welcome. And if you're coming back again, thanks for coming back. I see that Alison Barton's with us. Good evening to you, Alison. If you're on YouTube, please do give us the thumbs up. Consider sharing this stream across the social media channels. Lovely Jim says hello and hopes we're all doing well. If you're on Facebook, you can share this to your wall. You can use any of the emotions. Terry Wall, good evening to you. Give us the thumbs up, the love, laugh at the right time, and help us build this community. Lovely Mary Dixie, my circle leader, good evening to you. If you're on Facebook, do head over to the SBTV fan page after the show, perhaps have a chat with the wider community. Julie Caswell, good evening to you. And SPTV are across all of the social media channels, as am I. Claire Colbeck says good evening to Ash and everyone, and Richard on chat. Hiya, Claire. Julie Harcourt, good evening to you. You can find me, folks, at Ash Robinson Medium across the social media channels, and Spiritual Psychic TV at Spiritual Psychic TV, or SPTV, some of them. Kirsty Anfog, good evening to you, Kirsty. And of course, this fantastic website that the producer has developed. Hi, June Melkin. Spiritualpsychictv.online. A wonderful place. Dawn Collins, good evening to you, Dawn. You would have seen an advert for a couple of things going on. Hiya, Natasha. Do head over to the website, folks. If you haven't taken the opportunity yet to register to be a voter, please do in that amazing award ceremony. Claire Kendall, good evening to you. Fantastic opportunity to say what we think of our favourite people within spiritualism. Josephine Nicole, you're a new one here. Good evening, Josephine. Welcome. You can nominate your best and favourite up-and-coming mediums, your best demonstrators, healers, churches, centres, shows such as Being Spiritual with me, Ashley Robinson, your favourite host. All opportunities there. So you know, a lot of fun, a great opportunity to engage with each other. Hiya, Sally Worker, welcome. There's no award category for best producer, but we all know that's Richard. I'll have to think about an award for him. Kerry Watson, from oh, lovely, a different part of the world. Natalie Bentley, good evening to you. Come on, you Quins. Hiya, Gaza. Christine Noberto, good evening to you. Hiya. Patricia McCoy, looking forward to an interesting evening. Love and light. Hiya, Patricia. Kerry Watson from Tambourine Mountain. Hiya, Kerry. Joe Howe, good evening to you. And good evening to everyone that joins us in hyperspace across Facebook and YouTube. If you want to participate in the show tonight, and I do encourage you to do so, this is an interactive show. Hiya, Stacey, good evening. Then do make sure that on Facebook you are commenting directly on the live stream from Spiritual Psychic TV. And on YouTube, make sure you've logged in and click on the live chat. Hiya, Phil Shaw. It will be good. Sylvia Freestone, looking forward to your show. Well, thanks, Sylvia. Good to have you with us tonight. Hello, Dad, and I'm sure Mum's with you as well. Have a good show. Thanks, Dad. Morning from Australia. Hiya, Pamela. Good morning. Carly Williams. Hi, handsome. First time with you. You talking to Richard or someone else? Hi, handsome. First time with you, me, Swansea, Wales, United Kingdom. Hiya, Carly. Welcome. Yeah, I think, folks, what we'll do is we'll start with a couple of adverts this evening as I finish the hellos and welcomes, and then we'll be able to crack on with the show, because I want to let you know about a few other things that are going on. You saw an advert there about the SPTV Awards. As I said, fantastic opportunity, really easy to register. It might look a bit complicated to the unbaptized, but really a couple of minutes, you can register an account. You can go on there and you can vote for all your favorite people. If your favorite person is missing, then you can also nominate them. All you need is their name and their email address. They'll receive an email, they can accept the nomination, and they can fill in their own bio to appear in that category. So do think about that, folks. There's a lovely holistic fair for those that have access to the South Coast in Portsmouth in June. You can find out more information about that on spiritualpsychictv.online, and also our spiritual and psychic weekend in March, first weekend of March, down in Bournemouth. But you'll see here, June the 11th is the psychic fair, if for want of a better, was a holistic fair. It's an all-day event. You can come and go as you please, but in the evening we have this wonderful demonstration of mediumship and clairvoyance with 4 wonderful individuals, some of your favorite people on SPTV, lovely Matt and Kirsty Grogan, Polly Harnett and Bill Hughes. Now the doors open for 6:30 that evening for the mediumship. But as I say, get yourself down to Portsmouth early. There's lots of free, ample parking, and you can have a walk around some of the stalls. You can see some of your readers, buy a few bits and pieces, crystals, cards, and other stuff. There'll also be some SPTV personalities there. Myself included, my mum and dad from Women and Spiritualist Church will have a church stall there, and lots of you that have been following this show that know that I've been studying to be an ordained minister with United Spiritualists, and I'm just about to qualify, all being well, as a spiritualist counsellor. So I'll also be doing some spiritual counselling, which is free of charge. Any donations towards the charity or SPTV are of course welcome, but lots of opportunities to meet people, to engage with wider community within SPTV, and have a good old time at the fair. I'm sure weather in June is going to be lovely in Portsmouth, and as I say, make a day of it. You've got that evening demonstration of mediumship too. There's a new show next week with wonderful Marcus and Deb, Images of Spirit. So that's Friday the 21st from 8 p.m. Two great demonstrators and ambassadors for spiritualism, folks. Great team there. That'll be a great show. Okay, just going to do a couple more hellos. Livy, good evening to you. Julie Brinkley, hiya. Angela, good evening to you, my friend. Mandy Louise Paul, hiya. Oh, shall I pop along? Yes, you should, Livy. Definitely. Yeah, if we Richard was just saying, if we have a lot of people interested in coming from London and Surrey down to the south coast, we might even be able to get a little bit of a coach trip on, and people can stay down for the mediumship stuff too. I'm hoping to bring the family with me down that day. And for those of you who know I'm married. I've got two little boys, Ethan and Noah. But baby number 3 is due at the end of March and April. So hopefully I'll be able to bring all the family down to the south coast that day. Sue Lawrence says, I just wonder. Oh, it's gone. That's all right. I just wondered if, when being reincarnated, we choose a lifetime from the past, or do we always go to a life that is in the future of the one we've just had? Well, that's a really deep question, Sue. Some of which we will go into a bit more detail about, sort of life after life. But Richard and I were actually just talking on the show, just before the show live, about the meaning of the universe and our understanding of the universe and what does it mean. And some people will say that time doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in the spirit world as pure energy it does in the physical, in the 3D, and that therefore there is no past, present and future. It's all just happening at the sort of same time. And energy, as we know, can be in both one place and another place at exactly the same time, in constant communication with each other. But my understanding of reincarnation, which for those that aren't versed on this, is the concept that the physical experience we have here as a human being in this life, in this experience, this incarnation, there is an opportunity to repeat it. After our life, we have another life in heaven, in the spirit world, which we're going to talk a little bit about. And there is an opportunity perhaps to choose another incarnation. So my limited understanding of this is that time as we understand it on Earth right now as sort of human beings, then when we join the spirit world, we're quite close to that energy still, and therefore we are watching and observing our friends and family that are living their sort of 3D lives on Earth. If we chose to reincarnate, then we're choosing a life which is going to take place in Earth times in the future, even if it's the the immediate future, that the next step. And most of the evidence I've had from spirit world about this would suggest that when people do reincarnate, they often wait until many of their immediate friends and family have joined them in the spirit world. Sometimes they choose to then reincarnate together, different relationships and different roles. Of course, the possibility of being able to go back further, go back in time, reincarnate, you would need someone like Doctor Who to explain the principles of time and time travel. But in Earth, as we understand things, of course, that would be in our past, and therefore, if you were to go back and incarnate into a life which had already taken place on Earth, then the idea is, well, that could change then what is our now. So yeah, my limited human mind is unable to go much further than that. But I believe that if we choose to reincarnate, if we want to do that, then we do that in the future of Earth time. So yeah, good question, Sue. And folks, so you can ask me anything about spiritual philosophy today. My if you like, expertise to bring this, a lot of it is my honest, humble opinion. Hiya, Tracy. First time here. Thanks for joining us. Yes, a lot of this is my honest held opinion. It comes from an upbringing in spiritualism for a long time in and around Wimbledon Spiritualist Church, my home. Hi, Tina Place. You're here on very rare occasion. Great to see you tonight, Tina. Brought up in spiritualism. Yeah, it's my last year of 30s. I'm going to be 40 in September. So I've had that induction from my parents and grandparents and friends and family around. But as I started to work more as a medium, as a healer, welcome, Sue. I started to work more with my guides. I started to have a better understanding of my guides. And they, of course, started to influence me, both my principal guide and then my working guides. The guides who work with me with my mediumship and healing started to influence me and give me their thoughts and feelings and opinions. And then one of the most recent experiences that I had was meeting a wonderful guy called Ralph A. Steadman. And Ralph was, for want of a better words, my mentor on spiritualist philosophy. I loved listening to him and learning from him. Of course, I had my circle leaders, some of whom are on tonight, Mary Dixie and Jill Hay, who now lives in the spirit world, that guides me from that side. So all of these things all start to blend together and give me a bit of an idea. But Ralph Steadman, that I knew in the life he had, the experience he had on Earth. I believe that he works with lots of people from the spirit world, and I'm one of those people that he tries to help along. Now, for want of a better words, I imagine in the spirit world a bit of a committee. Josephine says a lot of mediums say your loved ones are leaving messages for you. What kind of messages do they mean? Messages of life after death, to show you that their life continues after that change they've gone through death. That's what I'd understand that as, Josephine. So, for want of a better words, I've got this committee in the spirit world, and I always imagine them sat around some sort of board table with my good friend Ralph Steadman performing the role of chairperson at the moment. Dawn Collison says, if we reincarnated back in time, that would make an immediate change there now. Yeah, absolutely, Dawn. I think we're on the same page. So within that committee, then I have lots of different people that actually start to influence me, and some of these people I've spoke about before. For those that watch me do mediumship, I talk about one of my mediumship guides, a guy called Bob Brunton. He was a godfather figure to me while he was alive. He was a medium and a healer, and about 18 years old, when I started delivering messages in Circle, Bob was one of the people that was introduced to me as one of my guides, as someone I recognised that was able to help me with that mediumship. Equally, when I first started sitting in Circle with Christine Woodham and Mary Dixie, I was very aware of a character that had a life as a Native American Indian, which sounds quite stereotypical, doesn't it, in the spirit world? But he's given me lots of evidence about his life in what we would recognise now in America as Virginia, around the time he had there and the details that man lived. He guides me a lot with my mediumship, and I'm still learning more about him. I also have someone who had a life in ancient Mongolia, a bit of a medicine man. He gives me influence. And then around this committee, I have all sorts of different people. I've got, people like friends and family that continue to learn and give me information. And as they all get together, they all approach this committee meeting with their own opinions. And Ralph, as sort of chairperson and intermediary, will say, well, what do we think about reincarnation? What do we think about that? And everyone sort of gives their opinion. And ultimately, what I then get is the summary, is the the strategic view, the big picture of that subject. Because of course, when you take a dozen different personalities, even in the spirit world, trying to get them all to agree is very challenging. Even though they find themselves in the spirit world, they're still entitled to their own opinions. Not all of them are going to suddenly become ascended masters of ancient knowledge and immediate knowledge. So what I give you, I always caveat with, it's my humble opinion based on my influence from my guide team. But we're going to talk a little bit more about heaven. And I wanted to sort of introduce that concept of the way that I see heaven. And again, the things I said to Richard, hiya, Mark Brown, lovely to see you, mate, was about, we always get, as a medium, evidence from people in heaven that say it's a great place, it's anything we want it to be, it's everything we need it to be, and I want to come back. That's kind of like a reoccurring theme across clairvoyance and mediumship. But I've been asking my guides, I've been asking my communicators for more evidence of that place in heaven. What does it mean to you? How do you live that life after that change that we go through called death in the physical 3D? So part of it is this committee, and for me, it's a visualization. Keeps it nice and simple. I'm not having to think about metaphysics and how the energy all works. I can visualize each of those individual guides sat around the table, sort of giving their opinions, talking with a voice, so I can hear all their accents and their personalities. But of course, there is no boardroom. There is no table. They have absolutely no need whatsoever to communicate using their voice. And I'm not even listening to them with my ears. I'm listening to them with my mind's eye. So there's almost like there's this shadow. There's this footprints or fingerprints of a physical body, of a physical life. And actually the guides themselves, we've just spoke a little bit about reincarnation. So many of the people that work with me have told me about previous incarnations and previous lives that they have had. Indeed, the wonderful Ralph Steadman used to talk about the fact that not only is reincarnation possible and we can do it, most of us do, and we do it dozens, hundreds, or even thousands or tens of thousands of times. But of course, when they communicate with me, what I'm getting is evidence of the personality they had. when working as a medium and giving a message to a client. We just had my friend Mark Brown up in a minute. Mark, if I was giving you a clairvoyant message and I was giving you evidence of a communicator, they're giving me evidence of their personality that they had while they lived, while they had this most recent experience. So some of the challenge I put back to my guides. Let's take Bear, a lovely bear, or running bear, as I first saw him, a running bear by a fall of water, and he tells me that was because when he was born, his parents seen a running bear, and he was born by the fall of water. So that's why I get that influence. But I've affectionately known him as Bear. Why does he introduce himself as Bear? He's a guide, he's a teacher, he's a mentor to me, he helps with my mediumship. What about all the other previous lives? Are they not as important? And what Bear said to me is that ultimately the last physical experience he had as a human being was as Bear, and he's very much attached to that life and that personality that he had. And while he has no desire to incarnate again as the human being of Bear, it was so familiar to him. In fact, he spoke about almost like an outer shell, which was very much like a spiritual body, and how this spiritual body is so close to the feeling of having a real body that that's why it's so easy for him to influence me and to show me what he looked like and what he sounded like and the way that he thought. And in talking to Bear about this, I asked Ralph Steadman for some guidance. And as Ralph often does, he took me to a particular page in one of his books. And I'm going to share just a little chapter, a few paragraphs from his book. So the book I'm going to read from very briefly is called A Practical Spiritual Primer by Ralph Steadman. And the bit I'm going to read is all which Ralph called the other side of life. So bear with me, folks. Keep your questions until I finish this bit, because I'm not a strong multitasker, and Richard, producer, might not be able to bring back your comments for the time being. So bear with me. Get yourself comfortable. Hiya, Tina. Good evening to you. So the other side of life. So what can we expect when we ourselves leave this earthly life and go into the next dimension? Let us imagine that we have spent some time in convalescence and have now come into the light. What are the conditions like? What will we do? How will we dress? Where will we live? And so on. Well, the first and most important thing is that the next dimension is not a physical world. Therefore, we no longer have a physical body, nor do we have any of the conditions associated with our former body. Therefore, there are no more illnesses, diseases, pains, or suffering, and no problems of mobility, or with the progressive loss of senses that are almost inevitable results of getting old. Neither are there any mental or emotional problems that have been associated with these conditions. We don't have any worries about ourselves whatsoever. All of these have been healed during our period of convalescence. But it is difficult to imagine what it is like to have no physical body. We have never been in that situation before. However, we still have all of our subtle bodies. And you'll remember that the final interface between the subtle bodies and the physical body was the replica of the physical body. We spoke about this, folks, in some of the previous shows when we spoke about incarnation and conception. Ralph goes on to say, although the interfaces were no longer needed after the death of the physical body, we as spirit still have it. And so we feel that we still have a body. But if there is nothing physical about the next dimension, then what is it like? Well, it is a dimension of thought, and there has been some very unusual consequences. In this earthly life, most actions start off with a thought, and although very often there is a long time between the thought and the action. If we want a holiday, it takes a long time to arrange for it to happen. We can dream about being in some sunny foreign resort, enjoying the warmth and the relaxed atmosphere, but bringing it about takes a lot of planning and saving up. However, in the next dimension, whatever you think about happens immediately. Think about being by the seaside and boom, you are there. Think about going to visit family members on the other side of the world and you will be there. Think about being with long departed loved ones, parents, children, relatives, friends, and you are immediately together. Now, this opens up some interesting possibilities. When you ask what you'll be doing on the other side of life, the answer is, what do you want to be doing? We are going to do a little exercise. Write down one simple sentence saying what your idea of heaven would be. Okay, so grab a pen or write this in your phone or just think about it. Write down a simple sentence, folks, saying what your idea of heaven would be. What would you like to do more than anything else? What would really make you happy? Whatever it is, you can do it and you can have it. There is only one provision. You will not be able to harm anyone else in any way. The reason is that all negative thoughts about others, and certainly all desire to hurt others, would have already been removed during your time of convalescence. We will have a look at what you've wished for and the likelihood and consequences of getting it a little later. So, going to skip forward a little bit, but this bit from Ralph is quite important. When I was giving this information as an individual at Weekly Talks, I asked my audience to do the same little exercise and tell me what they'd be doing in the individual idea of heaven. I reminded them that they could have or do anything and they wanted in their new dimension, but they would choose would only apply to them and to their existence in that dimension. They would not be able to change anyone else's life, nor would they be able to directly affect matters in the dimension they had just left, i.e. Earth. They wrote down what the ideal occupation would be, and the next week I analysed what they had said and commented on it. It was interesting to see that, although they could have asked for anything for themselves, food, drink, possessions, etc., not one of those wrote down a wish they actually asked for anything personal. Possibly a measure of their own stage of spiritual development by that time. So here are some of the individual wishes they expressed and whether or not they'd be likely to come true. Katie Rickson says she imagines heavens to be a little town. I like that, Katie. Thank you for sharing. Several of them expressed the wish to see members of their family or friends. Joy thinks it'd be pretty crowded in heaven. Yeah, maybe, but it's infinitely as large as it needs to be. So several of Ralph's group expressed the wish to see members of their family or friends who had already passed away, and that would certainly come true. By just thinking of them, they would be there. One asked to be happy, content, healthy, and evolved. All of those, the first three, would be granted automatically and immediately. She'd be doing exactly what she wanted and without a physical body to give her any of her health problems. Whether or not she became evolved or not would depend on the amount of study that they were prepared to invest in and do in heaven. One person wanted to visit and learn about other solar systems. No problem. Only think about them and he would be there. Ask about them and they would be told. Two people wanted to help animals. One wanted to help those which had passed. No problem. Another wanted a big animal sanctuary. Yes, if you're in heaven, no. If it were on earth, they could not directly control the earthly conditions. Three people had global ambitions, and regretfully, none of them were likely to come true. One wished for all things to all life forms, which is difficult to understand, let alone bring about. One wished to take greed and envy from the powers who think they rule the world, and the other wanted to bring peace to earth. All three were doomed to failure as they would have no direct way of influencing the world leaders at all. The remainder all wished to help those on earth in some way, to make a difference in their lives, heal them or give them hope. Whether or not they'd be able to do depended on many things. They might be able to contact people on earth directly, either physically if the people were sensitive, or possibly through dreams in order to advise them on the most advantageous course of action for them to take. They might be able to add their own healing power to the power of any healers who were attending them, or they might be able to contact them via someone like me as a medium. But they had to remember they couldn't change the life of anyone else. However wrong they thought that person's path was, however painful the physical condition, that was the pathway they had chosen. They have free will. And in order to learn the lessons they had felt they needed in their current life, in their current experience. So therefore, for those who were those or watching, or anyone else for that matter, to say that those people were wrong. It's not our choice. We have free will. Finally, I reminded my audience that when they themselves were on the other side of life, they would realize how difficult it was to make any contact at all with loved ones on Earth, and would possibly appreciate what amazing work the mediums who demonstrated for them each weekly actually did. So, folks, having listened to me talk about and read from the above, have a look at what you have written down as your ideas of what you will be doing in your heaven, and let's have a think now about how realistic they are. So, for those of you prepared to show and share, please consider putting in one of the comments. We'll take a couple. So we've said that when we get to the other side of life, we can still enjoy all the pleasures that we enjoyed on Earth. But how on earth can we do that if we have no physical body? How can we mix with others in the same dimension if they have no physical body? And that's where I find it easy to close my eyes and to think about pure energy, pure love as pure thought. And when I think about thought, I think about memories. I think about either taking myself somewhere that I want to be, or I think about something that's already happened. And for me, it's in that moment within my mind's eye when we think about pure thought, I'm able to think about that concept of heaven. It's existing almost as in my mind's eye all of the time. So as I say, folks, if anyone's prepared to share, please do. As we have seen, each human being is made up of bodies. And I did show folks about conception, which I believe the incarnation starts at that point of conception. But let's just remind about some of those bodies around conception and incarnation. All of them still exist after death in some way, shape or form. But the vessel, our being, our human being becomes a corpse once you take away the soul, the spirit that evolves. And if we think about that interface between our soul or our spirit, our personality, think about the interface between the personality and the physical 3D body. That interface, that spiritual body, then that is what goes with. Now, we know, of course, that we cannot make any physical changes. So when we've finished with our vessel and our body is unable to carry us, to be incarnated with us, we can change it. We can't destroy the body. We can change it. We can bury it and it can rot as a corpse. I'm not talking about people. We could cremate it and burn it. We can change it. Energy can be changed. What happens to the personality? Well, that continues to live a life after the change that the body has gone through death. And I think that that interface, almost like a shadow or a fingerprint between that and the physical body, is what goes with people to that world. And only they're existing without the physical sensations of sight and hearing. They're using that mind's eye expression. Sarah says, think my heaven will be helping those on the physical plane. Thanks for mentioning that, Sarah, because obviously have a collective consciousness again, because I was about to segue into that concept of guides. And we dedicated an entire show to the meaning of guides. But of course, if we're wanting to help people on Earth, and if it was our wish to do so, but we know that we can't influence it directly, then we have to do it indirectly. We have to work with people in a slightly different way. So when we did the show about guides, we spoke about the concepts of dedicating yourself to someone's entirely earthly incarnation. Sorry, Terry says, heaven to me is reuniting with my loved ones who have passed over and being surrounded with that love. Yeah, absolutely. And Terry, that would happen straight away. So when we spoke about the principal guide, like my principal guide who's been with me ever since my incarnation, I think that it's probably a little too much after you've gone through that change of physical death to suddenly arrive in the spirit world and immediately take on the job as a principal guide for someone that's about to be conceived and incarnated. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I just think that we need to spend a little bit of time in heaven. There was a lovely little old lady that I grew up with at the church called Fernie, and Fernie was a wonderful spiritualist. But she always said that once she went to heaven, she wasn't going to communicate with anyone. She would leave her love now, and she would go off and rest and explore. And to my knowledge, no medium has ever given evidence of a life after life. I know she's on the other side, but she's gone off to do that learning. And a bit like Ralph's circle when they spoke about wanting to evolve. They're going to the halls of learning. Perhaps people will speak about the Acacia records, do a bit of research. Having just lived the life as an example of Ashley Robinson, I'm going to go back and have a look at some of the other lives I lived and learn about those. Because now I don't have the physical 3D body, I'm perhaps in a better understanding to understand more about that. But I've still got this subtle interface of my physical body, so it still feels like me. I'm overweight and I've got bad knees, so when I die, hopefully before I die, I'll lose some more weight. But the idea is I'm going to reproduce my body the way the body feels without any of the problems, any of the imperfections. My knees certainly won't ache and pain. I won't have any of that physical pain. But take someone that's perhaps got a very traumatic death, either through a tragic accident or some sort of horrific disease they've suffered. Psychologically, a lot of that will come with them. So when they go to heaven, in that existence of pure thoughts, they probably need some sort of equivalent of therapy, some sort of rest and relaxation. And I believe that that's where they go. They go to that place. They're surrounded by other beings, other existence of people going through that experience that are there to help them. Sarah was just talking about wanting to help people. And in the same way that of all my regular guides, there's only a couple who I actually knew while they were alive. So there's Bob Brunton, there's Jill Hay, my circle leader, and Ralph Steadman. They're three people who regularly work with me and that I would give the label of guide to. But my nans and granddads turn up from time to time. Doesn't mean they're not guiding or helping me, because of course, when I attune to that way of thinking, to that level of energy, then in theory, everyone that's in heaven, everyone is on offer. So the last bit I wanted to sort of finish with talking about is, I suppose it goes back to a comment someone made. Heaven's going to be awfully busy, isn't it? Well, heaven is infinitely as big as it needs to be. And because there is no 3D physical capacity, then it's not congested in the same way. But, we often, as spiritualists, talk about this existence as the third dimension, the 3D that the body exists. So I've asked questions to my guides, and I've come up with some notes that I want to sort of share. And I'm not going to get into to sort of a deep level of this, but there's a quote from the Bible which talks, which I think it's from Jesus, when he talks about the fact that his father, referring to the divine God, as making a house or a home in that place that we call heaven, about there being many mansions within that house. This idea of huge houses within houses within houses within houses. Sally Francis says, yes, when my father died, he came through completely healed as a man of about 30. Thank you for sharing that, Sally. So this idea of living in heaven, of working as a sort of guides, this 3D experience of what we go through now. So we talk about up. We talk about heaven being up, maybe hell being down. I've asked for information about that, and the best explanation I've had for that is that heaven is vibrating at a higher level of frequency than we are in the 3D world. So we think about it as being up. It's perhaps not physically up, it's just faster or higher. So assuming then that as we ascend to the spirit world, that is the next logical number. If this is the 3D world, then the next level is the fourth dimension. I asked questions. I asked Ralph when he was alive, circle leaders of our spirit guides now, about what exists before it. And in order for me to understand that, Ralph helped me with a little bit of physics. And he spoke about particles of energy. Because we know that everything is made of atoms. We know that within atoms there are particles, and within those particles there are even smaller particles, primal particles. And Ralph said to me, you've got to remember that, of course, we can't even see atoms, let alone the particles. It's so tiny. But all primal particles are communicating with each other. They come together and they create patterns which create the particles. Particles are then part of an atom. And if you think about that level of energy, you think about personality being a collection of atoms and particles, then his conclusion was that primal particles are in themselves an individual and intelligent energy. So you've got to remember, of course, that primal particles are in themselves communicating, but they're also individually intelligent, but they come together to create patterns which create the particles, which create the atoms. So all of this intelligent energy all coming together to form just one atom, and then hundreds, thousands, millions of atoms creating patterns to form something else. God, as a description, and we did a whole show on this, folks, what and who is God. God is all of those primal particles of the intelligent energy, particles of life itself in creation. So for me, God is an umbrella term for absolutely everything. Every single particle in the universe as it continues to expand. So bearing that in mind, and as I say, for those that haven't been watching the shows over the last couple of years, go back and play back and look up the shows on guides, look up the meaning and definition of God. If God is infinite and without limit, and we think about vibrating atoms and the speeds of vibrations, then another word for dimensions could quite simply be the speeds of that vibrations. If an atom is doing that and it goes faster or slower, that could be the definition of dimensions, of an earthly sort of verbal interpretation of what they mean. So Ralph was able to then explain to me that that would suggest there are two levels or two dimensions where there are speeds of vibrations below what we're at now. Now, for what in layman's terms, Ralph would just say to me, level dimension 1 and 2, just think about it as darkness, because it's vibrating at such a low level. You're now in the light, in that third dimension, you're going forwards. But perhaps there are other forms of intelligent energy within that, because it's still particles of intelligent energy. So the third dimension, human earthly life. Alison was just saying she would like to meet friends, family, and pets, and then just haunt people. Yep, my granddad said he'd always put himself on a poltergeist course. So in this third dimension, what are we here for? Well, we spoke about this before, and we learn everything, be everything, take part. Perhaps as part of that experience, perhaps all of those particles that form patterns to create atoms, that form patterns to create human beings, perhaps they started off life as minerals and plants and animals, and eventually all those atoms come together in that pattern to form a human body. And in that experience, we are learning to be a conscious body, the interface, the spiritual, mental, and body, the psychic shell linked to the physical body, all of that coming together in the third dimension as a human being. And that's the difference between a human being and a corpse, because a corpse is just the atoms left that were that vessel. So the fourth dimension then, which I always think about as higher, faster vibrations, that place I call heaven. What is it in reality? Well, it's a transit corridor. It's a transition. It's an ascension. Ralph would say to me that in the fourth dimension, there's no permanent residence. People aren't necessarily living that life after life in that fourth dimension. They're almost like visitors. Think of it as a portal or a gateway. And Ralph would say, if you really want to think about levels of vibrations and energy, then you need to think about spirit world as existing in the fifth dimension. And in order to get there, you've got this three dimension, this transmission to the fourth dimension. And the fourth dimension ultimately is a corridor. Sometimes people might refer to this corridor as limbo, of the place that the personality goes to before they reach the spirit world or heaven. I always think about the afterlife as all life after that change we go through called death. So it's life after life, the afterlife. There's only one afterlife, and we're there. and we can all exist. But if you want to be really technical with the physics of this all, then I quite like the idea of seeing this limbo, this portal, because the way I work with my mediumship, in the same way I discussed my boardroom and my executive committee sitting around it, I see a waiting room. And when I deliver my mediumship, I imagine Bob and Bear and a few other people inviting personalities to come and sit in the waiting room. I've often said, the people that knew that show Quantum Leap in the 80s, I see it like that waiting room in Quantum Leap. And actually, it makes perfect sense to me, therefore, that fourth dimension, that transit, that corridor, when I talk about Bear as my gatekeeper, about protecting me, about making sure that only the right people are working with me and coming into that waiting room, it makes perfect sense. So the fifth dimension then, again, it's still the afterlife. It's just slightly higher, faster. Fifth dimension insists there is no negative energy, because the portal that we just spoke about will reject it. Anything negative, rejected. And perhaps that's why people talk about an afterlife and a limbo, because they're still carrying an element of perhaps anger or fear or anxiety. But anything negative, which is still attached to our interface of our body, is unable to continue to ascend or progress or evolve, because there's still this element of negative energy which needs to come off. Spiritual and mental, all interfaces will eventually fuse together to create a soul, which will cross into the fifth dimension, but may eventually dissolve and separate by the 10th dimension. And that was something that Ralph said to me when I first met him, and it took me years and years to really understand that. But I think what he was saying is that when we first cross over, when we go home to that place that I call heaven, regardless of the dimensions, that afterlife, I've got this interface with me, and I've got this body and this shell. But actually, if I continue to evolve, if I continue to experience more in the afterlife, then I'm gonna not necessarily need that. And Ralph used to say it could be up to 13 dimensions if this was the third one. Julie says, my great nephew told us about 3 places in heaven. One place people were really sad, another was very nice, and the third place was fantastic, beautiful. He was about 3 when he told us. That's a lovely, simple explanation. I do love simple explanations. So I've admitted to you folks, I don't know an awful lot about this. I've had to research it. I've had to ask my own guides team. So between that, I think I understand enough about the afterlife, spirit world, heaven, where my messages come from, where my communicators go from, where the personality of our loved ones go to when they cross over and they go home, of where the incarnation and conception happens, those people that come from heaven, that 4th and 5th dimension. But between what might be described as a 5th dimension or a 5th level or the 5th house within a mansion to something like, the 12th or 13th, I don't really understand it. The only way I can imagine it is if I was in B&Q, the DIY store, and I was looking at a paint shot, then each time you go up a level, it gets lighter and brighter and lighter and brighter and lighter and brighter until you're at the absolute purest of energy and light. And so I think that whole idea of ascension, of about rising, about evolving, is all about our own knowledge, about how much we continue to carry with us. I'm going to finish this bit of the if you like, the chapter by paraphrasing some of the answers to the questions I've had, because I was like, is it a one way? Is it like a one-way escalator to get to heaven? All of a sudden in the 4th dimension, and you get up to the gates of the 5th dimension, and go, hey, you can't come. Negative energy. What are you going to do about it? So one of the things around that was that someone said to me, karma. That's what karma is. Karma is that negative energy. It's that karmatic debt. And you can't take any of that negative energy with you. You're going to have to go and work it off in another life. So perhaps people in that 4th dimension, perhaps that's where they make the decision to incarnate from, to reincarnate, to go back and work off some of that karmatic debt, because they're keen to progress, they're keen to evolve, and they feel they've got to work off some of that negative energy. perhaps within the spirit world, through some healing, some therapy, through sorting out some unfinished business, you're able to pass through that next portal into that place within heaven, this place of the sort of fifth dimension. And that in itself was quite interesting to me, because I wanted to know that if once you're there, can you go back? Well, of course you can, because actually I think that heaven, as an umbrella term that I use for the spirit world or spirit worlds now, that's where people come from. They effectively come from the fifth dimension. They jump on the shuttle bus. They arrive in the fourth dimension, where the planes between this existence and that existence are much closer, are much thinner. They're able to jump into my waiting room, to bump into Bob and to Bear, and they're able to give their messages. And afterwards, that's where they pop back. But of course, they don't need a shuttle bus, do they? Because wherever they think, boom, they're there. It absolutely happens straight away. It's immediate. So I do think there is movement between these dimensions. But I do think that depending on your understanding, your knowledge, and your experience, and of course your desire to evolve. We'll go back all the way to begin the show, and I said, what is your desire once you're in heaven? If it's just to be happy and be around your loved ones, you can probably do that in the fourth dimension. But this idea of continuing to progress, of learning, of evolving, of almost getting rid of those skins like a snake, then there's this idea that you're continuing to progress. And perhaps the personality of your last incarnation is less important. Natalie says, surely we all go back to spirit with negative energy, as no one I hear on earth is that pure. Natalie, I agree with you, absolutely. And I think that's why we all have some sort of karmatic debt. Now, we dedicated an entire show to karma. We dedicated another one to reincarnation. We spoke about the fact that it was almost impossible to complete one experience on Earth and ascend with purity, with no negative energy, to that that next place, that fifth dimension. And that's why I think that reincarnation actually is common. It's not necessarily part of spiritualism, but it's part of us understanding and experiencing everything. Raf said to me that he believed he had perhaps done it hundreds of thousands of times in order to progress within the spirit worlds. Other people perhaps have come from a much higher place, a higher level, a higher dimension, and they come down for an incarnation, for an experience, perhaps as part of a soul agreement or a soul contract, to help with an experience and to go back. And the last question then that I'm going to share that I had an answer on was around this concept of ascended masters and guides. Because I said to you that I think that when you immediately go to the spirit world, you can't necessarily dedicate that experience, that life, to be someone's soul guide, their principal guide. But actually, as you progress, perhaps you can. So there's this idea that as you continue to progress within those levels and dimensions, some people talk about the ascended masters, and these people that have reincarnated several times, that have had lots of lives and experiences. And I certainly believe that, for want of a better words, they are spirit. They're still the personality. Even Jesus, who was a wonderful leader and teacher, once he ascended to heaven, I imagine that he can move freely between the dimensions and the different places. Is he continuing to guide and help people? Well, he was Jesus. Of course he is. If he can continue to lead and influence and help, then I'm sure he's doing that. Now, what is it that qualifies him as an ascended master? Well, I think it's very much a human term. We love labels as human beings. We love labeling things and people. Well, it's a spirit helper. It's a spirit guide. And actually, some of the purest spirit guides, when they've influenced, you see that the labels for them are absolutely irrelevant. My good friend Bear, my mediumship guide, he's still quite attached to Bear. I, as a human being, always want to know, who are you? Who were you? What was your name? Where did you live? What was your age? When did you die? What year would I understand that in? And I'm wanting to do that research. Even my ancient Mongolian, I'm going back like 10,000 years to try and research the evidence that he's given me. But I'm the one that's attached to all those labels, because the longer they're that side, perhaps the less interested they are in that detail. It's less important to them. Bear, who's been in the spirit world shorter period of physical time as I'd recognize on Earth, describes the fact that one of my Mongolian guides, a guy I refer to as Sai, has been in the spirit world longer than him when you count it on Earth years, but has still more to learn. So time is irrelevant. So that's a little bit of an introduction to some of my guides and what influenced my spiritual understanding. What makes me spiritual, my being spiritual, some of my understanding. around the spirit world, what it's like, what it can be, some of the introduction to dimensions. We've got about 10-15 minutes, folks, and I'm really keen to get some of your thoughts, feelings, and some of your opinions on this. Do you agree aggressively with everything or anything I've said? I certainly hope I haven't offended anyone, but I'm interested to know why. Do you agree with anything I said? Is it like learning a truth again for the time? Because this isn't something I've made up. I've asked people. I've come to my own opinion, but I've done this in a human body with a human mind on the understanding of my guides and the level of evolution that they have got to under the watchful, wise eyes of Ralph A. Steadman. But I feel comfortable with those truths as I've come to explore them, as I've come to know them. And I hope that for some of you that are interested in some of this, it's been useful for you to come on this little journey with me. So I'll pause and take some water, and I'll see if we've got any questions. I think I'm going to have to check some of the Facebook comments. Not all of them are coming in, folks. I'm going to have to do some of this myself. So I told you I was terrible, didn't I, at multitasking? Give me 2 seconds. Oh, there we go. Thank goodness my saviour, the producer, is here to help me and give me some of this. Otherwise, I'd be trying to catch up. So my old mate Jeremy Stokes, fascinating, great insight into how you developed your relationship with your guides, beautifully articulated. Thank you, and you know, I think you're a master of words, Jeremy. Thank you for that feedback, mate. Sue Lawrence, do we choose our parents, and if so, do we have any influence over helping them to get together? Oh, nice question, Sue. I think yes and no. So yes, if we're choosing an incarnation, we have some element of doing that. Yeah, I don't know how old my audience is tonight, but do you remember Blockbuster Video? I used to speak about, you know, choosing your DVD or VHS tape in Blockbuster. You could do that to a certain extent, like your life. So you can think, well, I want to be born in that part of that country, on that planet, to that family, and that's who I want to be involved with. Perhaps you already had a contract with them. Perhaps you'd previously been their parents and you want to be their child. So all of that's possible, and you can have potentially some influence. But remember, of course, when we're in heaven, when we're in the spirit world, we can't directly affect anything that's happening on earth. So perhaps if you've been planning this for a long time, you're waiting for the two of them to meet and to fall in love, because there is an element of destiny that play to all of this. But we are wiped of any prior knowledge or experience from the spirit world. We are given free will. We are spun around, taken away of all primary senses of survival, and then pointed into the world wide world. So yes, I think that we can choose our parents to a certain extent. Equally, everyone's making free will decisions all of the time, which can interfere or muck up with destiny to a certain extent. Good question, Sue. Madeline Long says, yes, I agree with all. I've had many incarnations and I feel this from unusual gifts in the lifetime. Melanie, thank you for sharing that. That's a nice way to do it. Tina Place, it's quite mind-blowing, but definitely feel there is a lot of truth in this and feel it has been very useful. Thank you. Tina, you're very welcome. And I'd say, for me, the most important thing about what makes me spiritual in this life is actually, this is interesting stuff to know, but the most important thing is to live our lives as best as we can for the now. Any knowledge of previous lives has already been erased from our mind, so it's obviously not that useful to living this life. We're here for a reason. Joe Howe says, how can energy talk to mediums? Well, we are energy right now, Joy. You and I are a bunch of atoms that make joy and a bunch of atoms that make ash. The atoms themselves, we thought at one point in science were the smallest you could break anything down. Atom, the smallest thing after cutting the string into lots of bits, cut it in half, cut it in half, cut it in half, cut it in half, atom. But actually science progressed and we said, the atom has particles. Within the particles, we have all these intelligent bits of particles. That is energy. Energy talks to each other. We don't really understand it. Well, I don't, because I'm not a physics science. But scientists tell us that energy is in constant communication with other particles at different places all over the world. So, as a personality, when we die, when we give up our vessel and our body, the corpse that is left, the personality still exists. as energy, and it's the energy of that personality that influences me as a medium, with my guides helping me to understand. So hopefully I've understood your question properly and I've answered that, Joy. Natasha says, do our loved ones visit us as White Feather or Robin when you think we need comforting? Natasha, if you believe that, then yeah, absolutely, why not? I don't think they have to. I think if they have the ability to visit us, and I certainly believe they do, why do it as a white feather or a robin? Um, I think that from a physical phenomenon point of view, I've witnessed things that have been physically produced by people manipulating the energy from the spirit world. I think that if we ask for a white feather as proof of life after death, or as proof that our loved ones around us, and we get a white feather, then it wouldn't be beyond the world of possibility for our spirit friends and family to find a white feather somewhere, move it, and put it to where we need it. I've always loved the idea of the robin bird. It's something my nan used to talk about. And I don't think that in heaven they need to, physically manifest themselves as a robin to come down and see us, because they're pure energy. They're pure thought. They can do all that. But if a robin is close to us, can they influence the robin to go and show themselves to us so that we think about them, think about the memory? Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think spirit have to physically manifest as white feathers and robins or coins and other things in order to be with us, but they absolutely do visit us. They're around us, and they will find any way, shape, or form to influence us. And whatever we understand as them being close, we ask for those signs. Then why not be them? I think that in order to rule out normal stuff, you have and look for supernatural, you have to rule out the supernormal. So if a light blinks, you want to understand, was that a dodgy bulb or dodgy wires or dodgy electrics, or was it intelligent? And the whole concept of modern spiritualism came from knockings and rappings and tappings that the Fox sisters picked up in New York. And it was about understanding that sometimes things happen for a good reason. Sometimes it's an intelligent energy trying to communicate. Joe Stainsbury, she loves and believes of the robin bird too. Yeah, thank you, Joe. That's lovely. One more question here, folks. Wendy Gawley says, do we get the chance to make amends for mistakes we've made in this life, Ashley? I believe we do, Wendy. And it goes back to that question I said to everyone at the start of the show. What would you do in heaven? Now, anything you wanted to do in heaven for yourself, click your fingers, it's done. Of course, if you're talking about making amends for mistakes you've made in this life, you can't immediately directly influence things that are still happening on Earth. But you could come back as a guide, you could work with existing guides, you could go to mediums, you could look to articulate yourself. And if I think about, as a medium, every message I've given has, strong reoccurring themes of, I love you, and sorry I'm not there, etc. Equally, it has different messages for different people. Some of the most random bits of evidence, whenever I've seen stuff from other mediums, or I've seen myself on playback, you get unfinished business, don't you? Mediums trying to say, I really wish I'd said sorry when I had the chance, or I wish I'd said I loved you more, or I wish I'd played more golf, or played less golf, or worked more, or worked less. So I think that there's an opportunity through mediumship for spirit communicators to do some of that. And I think that in terms of direct amendments, if you can't do that through healing and through mediumship, then perhaps it's introduced the concept of karma and the opportunity for reincarnation. Perhaps you see something that you want to do differently, or you want to experience differently, and you have a go at that. Now, some people would say there's no such thing as a mistake. Everything that happened was meant to be. And of course, if we think about destiny when we choose incarnation, then yeah, that makes sense. It wasn't a mistake, was it? It was part of your destiny. But of course, there's free will. And free will, I've said, can influence and mess up destiny. So perhaps you did something when you felt the guide and the direction and the steer to do it differently, and you look at your life as your most critical judge, and you think, oh, that was a mistake. I wish I'd done it differently. My dad, who's very much alive, he was communicating in the chat room 20 minutes ago, would talk about the fact that the only true regrets in life are perhaps the things you don't do. And therefore you won't necessarily get to heaven and regret it in the sense of it was a mistake, but you might look back at your life. I've had evidence from, say, people who've had addictions to things like alcohol or drugs, and they work a system of the equivalent of 12 steps when they get to heaven, if they want to, and they go through that, and perhaps they look to make a list of people and wrongdoings they've done. And I've certainly had evidence of people trying to work through those steps and make those corrections. So Wendy, hopefully that answers your question. Thank you. This is a good one. And last couple of minutes, folks, for any last minute questions. Julie Brinkley says, are our loved ones with us all of the time? Yes and no. Yes, they're around us in the same way that the spirit world, heaven, earth, it's very much blended together, but it's at a different frequency. No, in the terms that they're not, creepy predators watching us in the shower and with us all the time in that sense. I think that spirit come and go. They have to be invited to a certain extent. If you really don't want anyone from the spirit world, if you have a reasonable expectation of privacy, then you get a reasonable expectation of privacy. There are divine rules and laws that set about this. But yes, spirit world and our world are actually very, very close together, particularly that transit, that corridor, that place of limbo. But for me, again, it is the afterlife, and they're around us, absolutely around us, and they like to give us evidence that they're really close. And some of the evidence I get from communicators is really specific stuff. People will say, on this day and at this time, you were doing A, B, and C, and I know because I was there and I was with it. So they like to give us the evidence that they are around us. They're not necessarily with us all the time. And of course, although they can be in many places at the same time, they might choose opportunities to do nothing other than to learn or to rest and relax. So hopefully that answers that, Julie. Sharon Hole, do you believe we have a soul groups when we go home? I do, Sharon. I don't think it's absolutely necessity that we only stick within our soul groups, but I do think that we travel. Birds of a feather flock together. I think that there are many people on our journey and experience. Some we like and love, and some we don't. And I think to a certain extent, when we come across people and we have a gut instinct about them being good, bad, fun, someone that we can trust, or someone we can't trust, a lot of that is instinct, perhaps from previous lives because of soul groups. I've also had direct evidence. I am a believer in reincarnation. I've had evidence through reincarnation and past life regression that members of my own family and I have traveled together in previous sort of lives and existences, and those groups and relationships have the opportunity to change. So yeah, I do think it's possible. I don't think it's an necessity. In the same way, I don't think you have to reincarnate, but I do think that some choose to, and some choose to do it in groups because they enjoy those groups. They enjoy doing it together. It becomes a lot of fun. I think if you can get to that evolved state in level dimension 11, 12, etc. So let's do it again. That was fun, wasn't it? Let's go back and do it again. This time I'm going to be a man, you can be a woman, you can be older, I can be rich, and you can be poor. I think all of that is absolutely possible. Thanks, Sharon. Thank you for that divine spiritual wisdom, producer Richard. Myra Thompson says, if you're waking up with a song in your head, is there a message in the song from your loved ones? Quite possibly, Myra. It might have been it was a song that you heard before you went to sleep and it was the last thing that's in your conscious. It could be as simple as that. But yeah, why not? In the same way that spirit might send white feathers and robins our way, why not a song? Almost all of my messages I give as a medium is through the influence of my own memories, thoughts, feelings, smells, tastes, pictures. And if I was giving you a message, I wouldn't know probably your guides and your loved ones. So they come through, they use all of those things in my mind. And absolutely, if they can put a song in your head, which is a message, and you can interpret that, then yeah, absolutely, that could make perfect sense. There are some really clever dream analysts. And we've had a couple of on SPTV you can watch on playback. You can also Google a lot of this stuff and have a look on YouTube. Certain things or symbols from dreams can mean certain things. But yeah, I believe that. My granddad had a particular whistle, and I often hear that whistle. I wake up and I just know that it's just him whistling. He's given me that memory of a whistle to let me know he's close by. So thank you, Mara Thompson. That's lovely. Danielle McClure. I'm new to learning these things. I recently lost my son. Daniel, if I may, I would like to send you some spiritual healing and my condolences. I'm sorry about that. you say you're here learning things and you're new to that. Hopefully we're giving you some comfort. There is no replacement for the physical loss of people, but hopefully some knowledge about life after life, knowing that in that sense there is no death. They're just in another room, another place. So that's quite important. Thank you. Sally Francis says, you are very knowledgeable. My guards are saying so. Well, thank you, Sally, and thank you to your guide team. That's lovely. Menley Long, what about parallel universes? Oh, how long we got, Menley? What about them? In theory, for every cause there is an effect. For every decision there is a domino. And if you can imagine that for every time there is a decision to zig or to zag, that sets off a new set of dominoes, then yeah, there are constantly parallel and multiple universes and dimensions happening all of the time within our own existence. But again, really, yeah, BBC and Doctor Who, I think, do a better job of explaining the art of the possible with some of this stuff. But I also think that sci-fi do a wonderful job of contextualizing in plain English the art of the possible. There was a sci-fi show I used to love as a kid called Sliders. I know that my circle leader Mary had watched that. They could open up portals to the parallel universes, and they could travel between them. And I think, yes, some of this probably just exists in people's imagination. But actually, is some of it their own spirit guides and helpers, giving them a little glimpse about other things that are possible, and then sci-fi and Hollywood have a way of portraying it for us. Then yeah, absolutely, I think that's totally possible. So yeah, I think we can exist in parallel universes. Perhaps it's, as Richard and I were discussing before the show, it's all part of our higher self experiencing ourself. Jade says, I dreamed of something that came true, but then stopped having that reoccurring dream. Well, the fact it was reoccurring and then it happened, it sounds like almost a bit of a premonition, which sounds pretty cool. Hopefully it wasn't scary, and hopefully it was a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. Perhaps this was because your subconscious had picked up on the fact that something was likely to happen. Perhaps it was a dream, and it was a dream that quite literally came true. We talk about that phrase, my dream came true. If it's to win the lottery and then you eventually win the lottery, you can say, well, my dream has come true, and I've had this dream because I've visualized what it's going to be like to spend the money. Equally, you could say that when you're in Blockbusters in heaven choosing the life of Jade Fleming, you skip to the back and you say, in that scene, I'm going to win the lottery. And therefore, the reoccurring dream is about something like that happening. I think that Hollywood, again, does some amazing ideas of contextualizing this. So I was watching some of the old Matrix films the other day. Richard and I were talking about the new one, which I haven't seen yet, and he has. But, Matrix, they talk about deja vu, and it was the Matrix changing something. There was a glitch in that system. But actually, perhaps deja vu is you remembering something from that incarnation, something you watched in that DVD equivalent in Blockbuster Video. So if you dreamed of something that came true and it was a reoccurring dream, and that reoccurring dream stopped after it coming true, perhaps that was you knowing that something was going to happen. It was a part of that destiny. Thanks, Jade. Good question. Right. Last question will be from Slater Paul Liz. As we are approaching time, folks. So Slater Paul Liz says, surely we go without knowledge of life here on earth or spirit will not settle, be stuck in the middle. So go back to where you start from. Person who loves someone may not know them in the spirit world. Okay, quite a lot to unpick there. But yes, knowledge of life here on earth or the spirit will not settle back. I think that we have everything we need. Okay, if the purpose of us incarnating was in order for us to start our journey and continue one foot at a time towards paradise or utopia, and that we are given this map of how to get from the start to the end, if each day walking that journey is the representation of a single incarnation, when we go back to heaven, rather than go back to start, we get to go back to the map where we last left it, and we get to continue to progress in order to experience as much as possible in that ultimate journey. So everything we need, we have. We are trained, equipped, and guided to take one step at a time, one day at a time, to go forwards, onwards, rising in a trajectory towards our ultimate goal. And that might be achieved in a single incarnation and a single experience. But the knowledge of some of the stuff we're talking about today, I think there are breadcrumbs. There are breadcrumbs within the universe that are there for us to choose to follow, should we so desire, to perhaps get a better understanding. But if it's a better understanding, it's only to get the most out of this life. So hopefully I've answered that for you, Slater. I said that would be the last question tonight as we're running out of time. Cousin Brett, you snuck in then. You still live. I am, mate, but it's you've had the last few seconds of the show. Love to you and everyone at home, and love to all of you at home, not just my cousin Brett and people I know. It's been lovely to see so many familiar names, friends and family on the show tonight. Lovely to see so many new names. And I do hope, folks, that some of those breadcrumbs I've been able to share with you have been useful. Do make sure you check out all of the Spiritual Psychic TV social media channels, or me at Ash Robinson Medium. Head over to the Spiritual Psychic TV directory, the awards, learn out about the training academy, the holistic fairs, so much so much to look forward to for us, folks. And it's been a great pleasure to be with you tonight. I shall bid you farewell. Good night and God bless. Stay safe and look after each other.
Spiritual Psychics TV. Online. Spiritual Psychics TV isn't just an online broadcasting service. We also offer many features via our website. SPTV offers a unique directory that uses geolocation to find your nearest reader or venue, just by using your postcode. The Academy section allows anyone to upload and create their own spiritual courses within minutes. For those who like to read, then our online magazine area will offer just that. The SPTV shop enables anyone to start their online shop, be it to sell used or new items. You can also find our schedule and information about our shows.
Spiritual Psychics TV, bringing spiritual people together.